Get With Soon podcast, which is all about surfing, spirituality, and creativity. And wow, after a few months, we're back here on the podcast. It's been way too long since the last episode was broadcasted. I just had a look. It was in January. So let's get back on track here. I'm more motivated than ever as I have a very inspiring guest on today's show. The guest I'm talking about is a woman that travels and teaches yoga all around the world. She's a world-renowned Jivamukti teacher and one of the most senior teachers in this method. She's featured as one of the 100 most influential yoga teachers in the US. And yes, the guest I'm talking about is Yogeswari. She's known for her vigorous, seamless Vinyasa sequencing and her thought-provoking philosophical teachings. Her whole life is dedicated to inspire other human beings, no matter if it's during her classes, workshops, or the Jivamukti teacher training she's leading as a facilitator. She is the founder and president of AZAHAR Foundation, an international non-profit organization that promotes cross-cultural understanding and non-violent conflict resolution through yoga and the arts. I had the honor to have her as a teacher during my Jivamukti teacher training this spring, and I'm even more honored to have her as a guest in today's show. And very happy to share this inspiring conversation with all of you, and hope you enjoy this talk as much as I did. And today I have a very special guest. My sweat on my skin is still drying. I had a full weekend with Yogeswari, who is one of the most famous Jivamukti teachers from the beginning on. And I'm very happy, very grateful to have you here with me. Hello, Yogeswari.
Well, hello, Thomas. It's very nice to be here with you, and I'm honored to be able to participate in this podcast.
Thank you so much. So my first question would be, so you are one of the first people or teachers who, next to Sharon David, who are in the Jivamukti lineage. But before you took other yoga classes, you started with dancing. You have a very deep dancing background. Then you came to yoga. Can you tell us about how your spiritual journey actually started?
Well, I mean, spiritual journey starts, I think, when one is born, really, right? It may not be so conscious, especially when you have, you grow up in an environment that doesn't emphasize spiritual practices or is not religious or anything like that. And I would say conscious spiritual dabbling started for me when I taught at dance for a month at Omega Institute in New York in 1991. And that was a way in which I was exposed to very many different arts and therapy and spiritual disciplines. But then I met a spiritual teacher 2 years later. It was funny because I was actually I was part of a dance theater production that we rehearsed and performed in upstate New York in a university town. And during that time, I met a woman who is a sun dancer in the Native American tradition, who had also been a yoga teacher and an artist. And I ended up being snowed in at her house for 3 days, which led to very deep conversations, which then led to me embarking on being prepared for a vision quest in the Native American tradition. And that was a very revolutionary experience for me in my life. That was very transforming and really changed me a great deal.
So that was before you ever started the teacher training, right?
Yeah, that was before I started teacher training. I mean, I had done yoga before, practiced yoga before. I practiced yoga when I was 16 because my mother was in a course and she had the little cards laying around. And so I was really interested. I was very athletic. And so I just tried to copy the asanas. And then because I grew up sort of at the tail end of the hippie generation, I was also very interested in Indian and Buddhist philosophy. There were a lot of Europeans at the time that were going to India, which was also my aim to go to India. And instead I ended up going west. I went to Spain and to US instead of going to Greece and India, which had been my plan originally. but that was my karma, I guess.
And how did you get in contact first with the Jivamukti method? What was the experience for you when you went into your first Jivamukti class ever?
Well, all of a sudden, Jivamukti had started to become very trendy in New York. And that was sort of in the late 80s, early 90s. All of a sudden, there were so many people, from all walks of life, different jobs I was doing, and also in the dance world. They would tell me, "Oh, I'm going to yoga," or "I just came from yoga." And then I would tell them, "Well, where do you practice yoga?" Because I'd taken a few classes here and there, and nothing had really grabbed me. And then it would say, Jivamukti, Jivamukti. And so that name just started to sort of become known. And also, because I was doing a lot of dance production in different spaces, I started reading in similar spaces where I was performing Sharon Gannon and David live asana dance. So they were also performing still at that time, but there was a connection there, through that. And then one day, I had just started graduate school at New York University, and one day I just said, I'm going. And I went to the 2nd Avenue studio in the East Village, which was still a very bohemian place. There was a cash register, you couldn't pay with credit cards. There was no staff there was just one person. And, I went in, and there was this really, beautiful teacher who happened to be from the same town as me in Switzerland, but I didn't know her from Switzerland. And she taught a really great class. And at first, because I was sort of resistant to these sort of trendy places, I was a little bit mistrusting, and I wasn't sure if I was going to stay or not, and that kind of thing. And it was a really beautiful class. It challenged me as a dancer for a change, which, many of the other yoga classes hadn't. And I remember at the end she read a beautiful story about dolphins. It stuck to my mind. I mean, this was back in 1994. She read a beautiful story about dolphins and how dolphins stick to each other when one is trapped. When they are doing dolphin hunting, or they're trapped in a net or something like that, how they are they support each other. And that touched me deeply, that story. And so that was also this whole activist component, which my art form was very activist also. It moved me. I felt like it was about something else than just rolling around on the floor, basically.
So, and then you practiced, and then years later you decided to take a teacher training by yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I just started graduate school, so I was practicing once a week, and then I also had a big choreography that I was doing as a project for school, but also for me. And so I dropped it again because I just didn't have the time. And then when I finished graduate school, things didn't turn out the way I had expected, really, according to plan. And I was thinking of doing a PhD program at NYU. And the professor I wanted to study with didn't get tenure, and the whole department changed. And my advisor said, well, I don't think this is for you, blah, blah, blah. And then I just had it in the back of my mind, maybe to do this Jivamukti teacher training, because I'd heard it was the best one. And then literally it was as if the universe had taken a hand in my back and just pushed me in there. Because, circumstances were very unlikely that I could do it at the time, but somehow all the elements came together and I did it.
I also read in another interview that you never felt like living like a normal life, as to say, right? Like a life that everybody's living, more like being more free. What kind of influence did yoga have on your life still?
Well, again, as I said, I grew up at the tail end of the hippie years. So this was a time where young people challenged the establishment and the norms of living, basically. And I was one of those types of young people, who kind of like followed that direction of thought. And I grew up in Switzerland, which was a very regulated, organized, predictable life. And so one day I woke up, I was a teenager, and I had this vision of being on a train track. And it was at the end of my high school, and I said, if I don't get off that track now, I never will. Wow. So I had been lucky as a young person that I traveled a lot. My father was in aviation, so we traveled a lot, and I wanted to leave. I wanted to go into, explore the world. So this is what I did, and I always had that desire to go and know about different cultures, about living in other places. I never really had that desire to marry and have children and have a family. That was never my aspiration. The subjects that interested me for study were all kind of things like ethnology, theater, the arts, languages, mostly not the types of study that, the society was modeling as being a successful career. So I formed myself around my interests and my soul and heart desire rather than the pressure of family and society from a very, very early age. But I would say that what the yoga has given me and how it has changed me is that it has given me the philosophical and ethical structure in words and in a system according to which I can orient my life, and that is really important to me. And I think what already that first experience of the Vision Quest gave me was this inner dependence. Like I had a vision and I understood what the purpose of my life was. And the yoga, the daily practice of yoga and the meditation practice gives you an inner world, an inner awareness, an inner solidity that whatever is around you, cannot shake that. So I think sometimes, it's hard to live your own path, to carve out your own path. Sometimes, you struggle, like there's no money around, or you have to figure out how you're gonna live or where you're gonna live, and things are just very uncertain sometimes. But when you have that inner stability, I think you just know that things will work out somehow. And I don't regret one bit what I've done.
I found the example very nice that you said when you've been 16 years old and you had this inner vision. This is this story with the train. I mean, I think everybody should have something like that to go on the path they are meant to go. Because I think it's harder and harder with the condition of society, to trust yourself, because there's so much stuff from the outside that's coming. And that's, I think, very nice that you explained it. And for example, people who don't do yoga, what would you recommend, or what do you think, where do you see the chances that society is getting more conscious of what is like a real life, a real natural human life that we are meant to live, and not like living in these structures that are actually a very unnatural habit for us as a human being?
Well, I think, everybody has their own path in life, and some people have these sort of, they're living in a system that we're maybe questioning, but they're happy there. But there are many people who are not. And many people who suffer terrible burnouts and have to take antidepressants and that kind of thing. So I would say, if you're happy where you are, stay where you are. But if you're not happy, then you need to examine that. Life is short, and it's easy to kind of just follow along with the routine and then find yourself all of a sudden, okay, now I'm retiring, if you even reach that far, and what did I do with my life? And I think nobody should have that level of disappointment. What I found very valuable in doing the vision quest, for example, is understanding, and again, I have a limited understanding of Native American tradition, but is the purpose of that was, traditionally that young people in their teenage years would be put on a mountain for 4 days and nights to have a vision for their lives, to discover the purpose for their life. And then they came back and that was honored by the community, and then they could embark on that. However, the way it is in our society, it was already like that when I was growing up. It's like you're not being asked that. You're immediately put on a track where, you're supposed to do this and that and the other, right? And the idea of success has to do with all external things. It has to do with your social status. It has to do with your title. It has to do with your social class. It has to do with how much money is in your bank account, what kind of car you drive, what kind of position you have in your work. And none of these things can really make you happy, on a long run. And, so I think that, people need to find ways and means in which they can find their way back to what actually their vision is and their purpose, And that can happen through different means. It could be that a yoga practice, a meditation practice can reveal that. Maybe a writing practice could reveal that, like journaling, and just walking around the world with your eyes open and, taking courses with different people, going to concerts, things like that, but with a level of awareness, and not being afraid to sometimes just take the leap and quit when you need to quit your situation,
Amazing. Thank you so much. During the teacher training, I was very happy that you have been one of the teachers also next to Moritz. And there, I think it was on day one, there was a situation that impressed me a lot. Because I think the day before, you set the rules that the 15 minutes before the class, there's no talking, there's silence. So, and I think on day one, you came into the class and people were still chattering. There was the whole time. And you, totally clear, said something like, what did we say yesterday? Like about really in a strong voice and serious tone. And then the voices got down immediately. And I found it very impressive that how to show to standing your ground and but just to say, hey, this is it. And then I don't need to be someone else to be loved or something like that. I think a lot of people don't have this habit, and I also struggled a lot with that. I always try to be nice so that no one is angry at me. But that I found to be very impressive. Have you always been like that, or was it also like the way of yoga that brought you to that more like, hey, I'm standing my ground?
No, I think it's development as a teacher. I think I learned a lot from Sharon and David. I also learned a lot from my previous spiritual teacher. Because, my previous spiritual teacher, she wouldn't let me get away with anything. And and with Sharon and David, I learned that when you take the seat of the teacher, you have to stay in that seat of the teacher. And it's in the interest of the practitioners. It's not because of me that I'm doing that. Like in that particular instance, I wanted people to experience that the quality of their meditation practice is better when they don't get involved in all of this like side conversation beforehand. Because when you practice meditation, the mind has to be still. And when you're already having like a million of conversations beforehand, so many ideas that going through the mind is racing, the nervous system is very stimulated. And then if you're just having a 10-minute meditation practice, which is the amount in which we start at the teacher training, then we prolong the sessions. But how are you going to, you can't even get your mind still in 10 minutes. And it's also about respecting the sacredness of the space itself. And I think that's also something I've learned also from the sweat lodge communities. I've seen it with martial artists, who come in and bow down before they come into the room, or they might never leave the room with their back facing the altar, facing the room. They bow down again. And this is important in a yoga space, because I think otherwise it gets dulled down into this sort of mundane, some physical exercise, gym type of quality. And that's something that people should learn when they come into a teacher training. But a lot of people have told me, you're tough but sweet at the same time. So sometimes, when I really get kind of like that, and I sort of bring the sword down, 2 seconds later, I kind of, I ease it up a little bit. So it's not, you have to find a measure between the two, but you have to, you have to stay in that seat of the teacher. You're not just the sort of a collegial relationship with the student, or an entertainer.
Especially with martial arts, I also did it years, and our teacher always told us, with the shoes, you leave everything else also outside. There's nothing coming into the dojo. And then I also like this picture of, leave the dirt outside, here's sacred space.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also what we've been taught as teachers. Sharon and David were very adamant about that, and they were a very great example in New York. They were so professional. They would walk into the yoga studio. Sharon would always be very collected when she would walk into the yoga studio, even in the elevator. She wouldn't start chit-chatting with people. She was always focused. And then they would come into the class like that, and I learned that from them because I've seen teachers who come in, yelling at their boyfriend or girlfriend on their cell phone while they're coming into the studio. And what does that say to the student then? I mean, you're devaluing yourself as a teacher. You're putting into a state where you have less credibility as a teacher.
True. Yeah, sometimes when I get asked from friends, shall we go together to a yoga class? I'd rather go by myself, just be focused, because I know, then it's let's go to a yoga class, have fun, but try it at least.
Yeah, I mean, I find it nice when people come with their friends to yoga class, because it's a nice thing that they can share together. And it's not that they're just having fun, because, fun is part of it, but it's not like one of these things where you're talking during the yoga class, because you're not talking during the yoga class, right? So I think it's nice for many people, to come to a yoga class and share time together with a friend instead of always going to the bar to get drunk, basically, which is what a lot of people do after work. But once you are a teacher, it's a little bit different. I mean, you could still go to a yoga class with a friend, but, it depends. Like if you're going to a yoga class in the particular studio where you teach, that you're always visible. So it's a little bit challenging to do that. If you go anonymously to a yoga space, that can be actually very nice for a teacher. Like I've done that, going to, outside of the method, going to classes where nobody knows who I am, and that's a really nice and free experience.
You're traveling a lot, you're teaching a lot, you're doing a lot of workshops. What is your inspiration, your biggest inspiration to still keep going and doing it a lot?
Well, my inspiration are different things. It's my practice. It's the study that I do. It's the interaction with the students, with the practitioners. That energizes me a lot. And I like to travel. I don't particularly like airports or train stations anymore the way I used to, but I like being in different cultural settings. And because our community has become so international now, there's many people that I can only see them when I'm in their city or, and I see them once a year maybe. So it's always a nice way to rekindle a friendship or a student-teacher relationship or, these types of relationships that are being formed in the various ways in which we come together as a community.
Thank you. If there's a day in the life of Yogeswari where she's not working, not traveling, not doing yoga classes, not giving workshops, what is she doing?
Well, I mean, it depends where I am, right? But generally, I start my day with, basically practicing. It could also, if I'm back in my home in Switzerland, I might start with cooking and meditation and gardening and things like that, and do my practice, asana practice later. But my general sense is to do my meditation and yoga practice first thing. And then I may, if I am somewhere where I'm on a beach or something like that, I may go to the beach and take a walk or swim or just hang out. And, but there's very, very few days like that, because I almost always, when I have a day off, I need to catch up on some communication or something like that. Yeah. I don't really do much sort of leisurely activity, actually.
What would you recommend to anybody who's doing yoga for a few months or years and has that thought, I want to become a yoga teacher? What would you recommend to everybody who wants to be a yoga teacher?
Well, you try it, right? You need to really love your practice, first of all, and you have to have the discipline to want to do your practice. Then I would say, as in our system, we have the 75-hour teacher training, which is new. We have only been doing it for a short number of years. That's a very good way of getting into it. It's not as intense as the 300-hour, and you learn how to teach 2 sequences, and you learn how to assist a little bit. And that might give you an indication of whether this is actually what you want to do or not. And then from the 75-hour, you can do the 300-hour teacher training. So I think then you need to kind of be in that moment. So many people come to the 300-hour teacher training, they already want to do an apprenticeship, and they already want to, do the advanced certification and all of that. And we always tell them, take a little time. First just be here and do this 300-hour training. And then, again, if you are in a city where you have a Jivamukti Yoga Center, you can be an apprentice after that. And you can stay within the community and you can do an apprenticeship. If that's not the case, then, you have to sort of on your own continue your study and see how you do as a teacher. I think I want to break the myth of this idea that you can make a lot of money as a yoga teacher. Some people think that. Some people also think that opening a yoga studio will bring a lot of money. That is usually not the case. I'm not saying that is never the case, but, it takes, especially now that there's so many yoga teachers and so many yoga studios, it takes time. It takes time to build a student body and to build the skills of being, not everybody has that type of magnetism. That's another thing you'll find out about two years into your teaching, if you're able to actually interest people to come to your classes. It's a little bit tricky. It's a little bit like what an actor goes through, like in Spanish, there's this word called el duende, which means either you have it or you don't have it. And it's something that you could say it has to do with some charisma or something. there are certain teachers who I've observed who, they have studied a lot and they know a lot about yoga, but for some reason they can't quite communicate it in a way that a lot of people will be interested. And then there are other people who have less knowledge, but because of maybe they're more like entertaining, or I don't know what it is, it pulls people in. And that's a difficult thing to know ahead of time. But however it is, you need to put in the work, and I mean, if you teach Jivamukti Yoga, which is a very complete yoga, you need to constantly practice your asana. You need to practice meditation. You need to study the scriptures. You need to know what's going on in the world so you can put it all together and give a teaching that touches people to where they're at the moment. And that's like a whole day activity. I mean, it's really, sometimes really I'm at it the whole day, even if I just teach one class, So, and all of those hours that you're spending doing all of that, you're not getting paid. It's not like you're getting paid by the hour to do your practice or to study or to put a Dharma talk together, right? So that you have to live with that. And as an artist, I knew how to live with that, because as a dancer and choreographer, I had to do a lot of work for free, basically. But you do it because you love it and because it's your passion,
Thank you. You experienced this whole period of time with the whole meat and dairy industry. Can you tell us how you observed it from the beginning when you started yoga and how it's now, and what you feel about this whole change?
This is something that, I don't know all the details of it. This is not something that I'm constantly on the pulse with everything, but I became a vegetarian when I was 19, when I moved out to Spain, and my roommate was vegetarian. I mean, lacto-vegetarian at the time. Veganism, had never even heard about it, right? That was not something I knew about. And I basically stuck to that. I quit meat cold turkey and I never touched it again. And it was both for animal rights as well as, or animal well-being, as well as my own health, etc., that I did that. Of course, I was always sort of a bit of an oddball wherever I went, being a vegetarian at the time. And I heard about veganism even before I got involved with Jivamukti. There was a woman who all of a sudden, she was helping me with my dance company at the time, and I had offered her she had come over to my house and I offered her a bagel with cream cheese, and she says, "Oh no, I'm a vegan." I'm like, "What is that?" And she told me, and then shortly after that, when I went to Jivamukti is when I became educated on that topic. And so it took me as a Swiss, I have to be honest, quite a long time to start reducing cheese in particular. That was not easy. But now, both in the US as well as in Europe, there has been such a huge change in the products that are available for vegans it's amazing, and I remember the days when I would go back to Switzerland and you would get this horrible soy milk that would separate in the coffee and was really thin, and and there was not much else. And there was like this corn schnitzel. Maybe you could like find 2 or 3 or like a piece of tofu maybe. And now, I mean, the offering is almost too much. It's like, so I think it's a good development. What I resent is that a lot of these products are still packed in plastic. But I think that it's a positive, step. It's becoming more mainstream. There's a lot of fine dining now that is vegan. I just was in a place in Berlin yesterday that was, food was incredible. The creativity of the chefs was incredible. And one of my commentaries was, you bring someone here who is not vegan and they can't tell you anymore, what are you eating if you're not eating meat and cheese, So I think it's a positive development.
You mentioned it very nice during the teacher training that it's your kind of karma yoga because you founded the AZAHAR Foundation, which is a non-profit organization that promotes a peace culture through yoga, meditation, and arts. Can you tell us a bit about it and how it works?
Yes. So one of the objectives here is to be able to, again, because my background is in the arts and yoga, to bring these disciplines together under one hat. And the other thing for me was the fact that there are so many people still in this world who do not have access to the teachings, that don't have access to the opportunities that they may have if they're talented in any of these disciplines, right? So how it developed, especially after 9/11, which I lived consciously in New York, was to affect societies that are dealing with post-war situations, or in developing countries where people, just don't have access, and to try to develop young people. So I started, the first project was in Colombia, and we worked with people who had been in the paramilitary or guerrilla soldiers, and they were being trained to be social workers, and we added the yoga to it. And then that project stopped, so I ended up going to Cambodia with a student who had adopted a child from Cambodia, and started working in an orphanage, teaching yoga, and then started raising funds to develop these young people so they could go to yoga class every week, because there was just one yoga center at the time in Phnom Penh, and that they could also get some support in education. And then as these young people grew, because I really wanted to invest myself in a smaller group, but really accompany these young people. And we started organizing these peace camps where we would have speakers and presenters from different traditions, like nonviolent communication, meditation, people who were dealing with psychological trauma from or healing psychological trauma from the genocide in Cambodia, dancers, musicians coming in and teaching these young people about all these different possibilities, because many of them didn't even know what poetry was or something like that, And then we ended up being able to take over a yoga studio from two British people who wanted to come back to Europe. And part of the deal was that they would teach a teacher training. So they did an initial teacher training for about 20 young people. And we still have that studio. And we had a second teacher training. And we started another studio in a second city in Cambodia, in Siem Reap, where we also had a vegan restaurant. This was pre-pandemic. And now we are trying to develop the place in Cambodia as a social enterprise, so that we were steering it towards it becoming financially independent. But we are also, as the NGO, still trying to do outreach work to reach more young communities, because some of the teachers we have formed now are interested in picking up that kind of work, and they have even done it independently. They go to different provinces and teach yoga to young children. And so then we can start focusing more on actually the more professional trainings, and sending people to international trainings. Jivamukti Global has been very generous with us and has offered us a number of scholarships. So we now have a number of people. I think it's about we have about eight or nine people now in Cambodia who are Jivamukti certified. And we've started to do the same thing in Rwanda. The model was a little bit different in Rwanda, because we started working with adults who had already done a yoga teacher training with Africa Yoga Project. And so, Yeah, they're now working with different partner organizations. We don't have a field office in Rwanda, at least not yet. And, they're working mainly with, people who are survivors from the genocide and who also young people who have suffered from transgenerational, situations from after the genocide. Yeah. And so we've also have a partnership with Radhika, which is an organization that was founded by a friend, student of mine, who is also Jivamukti Yoga teacher, Maria Makaya, who is specializing on trauma-informed yoga practices. So she has also offered a number of scholarships to some of our teachers in Rwanda and Cambodia. And this is how it's working right now. But we're hoping to be able to create more international peace camps also that will bring together different types of issues where people, artists and yogis and spiritual leaders, together with people who do conflict resolution and nonviolent communication, can come together and find methodologies or even artistic collaborations that can then be performed in front of an audience or in a gallery or something like that, that address issues on how we can do peace building in this world, you know?
Sounds like a very nice project. Very good. And it's nice to see this ripple effect. So you put the seed in the yoga teachers and they're spreading out again and spreading the message of yoga, right? In the different places where they maybe don't come to the mothership.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the people who we've trained, you know, they have really realized the benefit that this has brought them. Because some of them were working in garment factories, which are basically look like factory farms, and the working conditions are really terrible. You know, some of them suffered from insomnia because of whatever they lived through during the war, genocide, things like that. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't really function in society. The yoga helped them pull all of that together. Others, you know, their perspectives were very slim on what they could do. They could maybe be like a garment worker or a prostitute or go back to their village and do a little small farming or something like that and not have a lot of skills. And I think by gaining the skill of teaching yoga and gaining a level of assuredness and confidence, even good looks from practicing yoga. I mean, good looks, I don't mean looking like a fashion model, but I mean like a nice skin, glow in the eyes, you know, a sense of self-respect, an understanding that I'm allowed to do these things with my body. Because especially for women, that's not normal in these societies. Like, you're not allowed to spread your legs. You're not allowed to put your hips up in the air like in a downward dog, or you're not allowed to wear pants or things like that. So just to break through those types of restrictions is a huge step. And so just like it happens for us in Europe or in US, when we benefit from something, we'd like to share it with others. And so it's beautiful to see that spirit coming through now, you know, with them. And one of the reasons why we call it transrational methods, not transnational, but transrational methods, is that yoga cultivates, as you know, as a practitioner, a sense of inner peace. If you want to see outer peace, you first have to cultivate inner peace, right? And I strongly believe as a creative artist that if you nourish the seed of creativity in a person, they're much less likely to engage in destructive acts. You know, so I think all of the arts, besides the fact that they restore a cultural identity when it has been lost through massive destruction in a country, building that back, building a sense of cultural identity, of cultural worth by reconnecting with the tradition of, let's say, Cambodian dance or Cambodian music, or in Rwanda, same thing, like, writing or dance or poetry. It's so important for people to feel rooted and to have a sense of who they are, and I think that it can really contribute to people being less easily manipulated in becoming child soldiers or being manipulated by hate speech, to then do very terrible violent acts, which we're seeing in the West now too, So that's where my passion is really, and my belief is.
Do you have any sloka or sutra that really sticks with you? That's maybe let's call it your favorite sloka or your favorite sutra?
That's a hard question, because there are many favorites. But when I think about ahimsa, the nonviolence, being the foundation of yoga practice, and also having been the major aspect that attracted me to Hindu and Buddhist philosophy when I was a teenager, ahimsa, nonviolence, I would say it's the sutra ahimsa pratishtayam tatsanidhao vairatyagaha, which basically says that if you become well established in nonviolence, or you could say a compassionate lifestyle, then the hostility of others around you will cease. And it's a tricky one because, many examples in our life, we might say this doesn't work. This is not true, right? We look at people like Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi were assassinated, and we just see that result. But at the same time, look at the work that these persons have created. Right? In yoga, we don't just look at the person as a body-mind entity. We look at all of the more expansive energy and influence that this individual may have had, right? So there's definitely, on a larger scale, you can see that there's been a reduction of cruelty in these particular issues that they were fighting for. But I also always think that when you're giving a teaching, it's good to not always jump to these very large, kind of abstract examples, but to actually practice it in your daily life. So I always tell students, just practice it like that. If you get out of bed with your left foot, meaning you're not in a very good mood, you walk into the kitchen, let's say, of your, with your kids, with your significant other, and you just take out that bad mood on the family. You know how they respond to you. It probably won't be very nice. There will be a lot of tension. Maybe somebody will slam the door and walk out of the house and not come back, or call you a name. And then your whole day is colored by a series of actions that have been caused by you projecting this bad mood, okay? So now, if you're waking up in a bad mood, but because you're self-aware, you know that. You know how you're feeling. And you are going to make an effort to change that in your first interaction that you're having with a work colleague, with a family member. And you just try to be kind to them. You might still be sad, but even if you're sad or angry, it doesn't justify taking it out on someone else. So you can still be kind, and it's a training. It may not come easy at first. Yeah, people might say, I don't feel like that right now, so I'm not going to be that way, but as a practitioner, it's a practice. So you try your best, and then you see how people respond. And that will uplift you, because now people may see, well, there's a person, she doesn't feel like herself today, like there's something a little weird, but she's making an effort. So let me support that, and then it sets off a chain reaction of events where your day will be a lot more pleasant. And that's essentially what this sutra says, and we can all make an effort in that direction, and that will immediately create a better world.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. It's amazing to have you here, to experience the whole weekend with you, the training, everything. And please keep inspiring the world. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you for spreading the word through your podcast, because again, some of us are not as skilled as you are with technology and, are doing these kinds of things. So I really appreciate that you're having me on and being able to reach some other persons that are not normally in my yoga classes. Thank you.
One last thing. You mentioned your next retreat. We shouldn't forget that. It's in Turkey. And when is it again?
So the next retreat that I'm teaching, which is the only one this year or in the near future, we're still kind of recovering from this whole corona business, is in Bodrum, on the Aegean Sea, from the 19th through the 26th of September. And then the following weekend, I'm teaching a workshop in Istanbul. So if anyone wishes to come to Turkey to spend a little bit more summer, come to Bodrum and then hang out for a few days, and you can come to Istanbul to the workshop.
Sounds amazing. We put all the links in the show notes, so you just go to the show notes and you see all the links of Yogeswari. And one last question. After the teacher training, you had also like a very interesting workshop, but we still couldn't participate. It was Gita and sequencing. When is the next version of that coming up?
Yeah, this is called the Teacher Refinement Course. And it's something that is open to Jivamukti Yoga teachers who have been practicing teaching. Who have been teaching for a minimum of 2 years. And it's like a continuing education workshop, and it's 2 weeks. And so the next one will happen at the end of September next year. We're still working on exactly who is going to do it and with what themes. I'm sure that what we did, Ruth Lauer and I, Bhagavad Gita, Dharma talks and sequencing will happen again, but probably not next year. It may happen the year after. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you want to find out more about Yogeswari's work and upcoming retreats and workshops, as well about her AZAHAR Foundation, just check out the show notes where I put all the links. And to all of those who are still looking for a nice retreat this October, maybe this one could be something for you, because we are doing a Jivamukti Yoga and Surf retreat in Ericeira in Portugal, which gives you space to reconnect to yourself with the ocean and a like-minded group of people. Then maybe you should also check out the link that I put down in the show notes. I'm very happy that you tuned in and can't wait for the next episode in 2 weeks. Bye bye, hear you soon.